Well, hello everyone. My name is Dana Perkins, and this is my good friend Landon Rawson.
Indeed.
I am the senior evangelist for the South Sound Church of Christ, and Landon leads the Kitsap region of the South Sound Church of Christ. And we are excited to be here today. Landon and I have been having many conversations about race and culture, and with all that's going on, I think our conversations have been really helpful and really important, and have helped, I think, both of us. I can honestly say they've been helpful to me to understand different point of view and perspectives, and also to be able to just share thoughts. Landon is my good friend, and so we have been able to really work through a lot of different things. And we wanted to kind of have a conversation together and invite you guys into our conversation. We're sitting in my backyard, which is my happy place. And it's a great place to just sit and talk. And so, the reality is that when I think about why we've been having these conversations, the recent killings of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd has sparked a national and worldwide awakening and a call for social and political reforms in our country. But in addition to all of that, there also appears to be a call and a desire by many people to just have some honest conversations about these issues of race and culture in our country today. And I think many people just want to sit down and work on some solutions. We want to just kind of figure out what can we do to find solutions to these issues and problems that we're facing today. And so that's why Landon and I decided to just sit down today and have such a conversation. Now, Landon, before I begin, I think it's fair to acknowledge that these conversations can be awkward. And every now and then, even for us, they've been a little awkward at times. And so I want to acknowledge that many of you might be wanting to have these conversations. And I want you to know, we want you to know that you can expect that they might be a little bit awkward at times, and that's okay. I think if we can acknowledge that just going into them, then we can give each other some space and grace in our awkwardness, and it just makes the conversation kind of go a little bit easier. I think secondly, we need to acknowledge that everyone may not be ready to have these conversations.
Sure.
The truth is that these are difficult conversations, and there's a lot of inner work, I think, that we all need to do to prepare ourselves to be able to go into these spaces where these are tough topics. And dealing with race and culture in particular right now is very challenging. Some of us are still healing and still processing our feelings of anger and sorrow, deep sorrow, and everything in between, right? And so I think sometimes we want to have these conversations, but we may discover that we're all not really ready, and that's okay. I would just encourage you to take whatever time you need to do the inner work that you need to do so that you can go into these conversations in a healthy way. And I think that will help the conversations to go well too. And then thirdly, I just wanted to say, Len and I are friends and brothers. And it's really easy, though awkward, easy for us to just talk. I think we've had conversations, not just even now. I think we've started having these conversations for a while. Certainly these recent events have been a catalyst for more conversations recently. But I really appreciate our friendship, our brotherhood, our partnership in the gospel. And knowing that we are indeed brothers in Christ has really made our conversations go very smooth, I think. And so with all that, with all of that out of the way, let's get started. So do you want to ask a few questions, or where do you want to go from here?
Sure. Well, I do appreciate being able to sit down and talk. Certainly, we've had a lot of conversations in the last months. And I appreciate those. I really believe those are important. It has been easy because we're close, and I appreciate the trust and assuming the best of me. I think there's been several times where I haven't been sure how to phrase a question, or if something's going to be particularly triggering or a sensitive point. And there's been a number of times you said, "Hey, I trust you. Just say it, and we'll figure it out once it's on the table." So I really appreciate those things, because it's hard to talk about, hard to know what questions are okay to ask and what questions really need to be asked. So just between us as brothers, I think this conversation's important.
Amen.
But I also think for the church at large, these kind of conversations that I really believe are the way forward, to be able to understand each other and to ask the questions on both sides of the table.
Right.
Uh, and so I think that's, when Jesus prays for unity in the church, I think that's so important. So for us to find a way to address the needs at hand, both nationally and inside the South Sound Church, I think it's to find a way to do it together.
Yes.
I think it's been a topic that's really tricky to talk about. And so I'm grateful. I feel like the last months we've been talking about it more than ever. And as challenging as you said, as awkward as they've been at times, I'm grateful for that. So I do have a couple of questions, I think, that have rattled around in my brain. I'm sure it may be in the brains of others as well, but to hear your thoughts, both to get your perspective, to help me to see more than my own perspective about these things. So I think we've talked a number of times. We haven't talked recently, so I think I just start by just seeing how you are doing.
Yeah.
I've gotten a couple of updates, but we haven't talked much this week. So how are you doing in all of this?
Well, first let me just say, personally, I appreciate the question. Just the fact that you asked the question and you're constantly checking on me. It really does speak volumes to me. It is so important to know that you care about what's going on with me and in my life. And so thank you for asking the question. I honestly feel like I'm doing good. Right now, this is a good week. I feel like I've been able to do some really good work in processing through my feelings and the different challenges that I've been wrestling with, not just with all of this, but with COVID and with I think the combination of it all, family and COVID and, these issues of race and culture and injustice and all those things, it has been quite a challenging several months. But I appreciate you asking how I'm doing. I think we're doing good. Jen's doing well, too. We're both in this, processing period, I think still, and I imagine we'll be for some time. But I'd be remiss if I didn't ask how you're doing as well. I know you weren't expecting that question, but I think I have to ask.
I appreciate that. I think there is a lot going on in life, for us as a family on top of COVID and, everything, certainly engaging in the social justice issues that are highlighted right now. I think it's really complicated for me sometimes. I think some of these conversations I've never had before. I think I probably should have had some of these conversations before, but I'm learning. I appreciate, I think maybe our first foray into these topics, I think you had approached me somewhat and just said, hey, I just really need a lot of support in this time, and I need people to ask me how I'm doing. And I appreciate that, because there's a lot of times I don't know what I don't know. And so for you as my brother saying, hey, this is something that creates a lot of feelings in me, specifically as a Black man in this time with the things going on. That's a perspective that's really hard for me to grasp in my own mind. That's not my story and not my experience. So thank you for approaching me, and I feel like you've been super graceful with my questions when I don't understand things. And there are certainly things that are frustrating for me that I'm trying to temper and wrestle with the ways that these things are affecting me. I certainly see the injustice, and that provokes feelings in me. I see the needs in our church maybe more clearly than I have before. And so trying to figure out, what does that mean as a brother and as a minister, how to take care of our people. I think there are some of the, I was going to say dialogues. Some of the monologues are really challenging sometimes when they are, I think, too broad. And somehow I feel like I'm being accused of things that can be tricky, and trying to figure out where my feelings are coming from and what specifically, and where the feelings on the other side of the table are coming from, and how do we move forward together. So I get that. Yeah, so there's a lot going on, but I'm grateful for I think the progress being made in the last couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but thanks for asking that also.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I think you got a question for me, right?
I do. I have
okay.
several. I have several.
All right.
I think something from me, as far as social justice issues, as the South Sound Church, we have a couple of things here at home that we've tried to engage with and support as followers of Jesus. Supporting the Coffee Oasis, which is really active in the homeless community, and Adorned in Grace, which is really doing a lot of great work in the human trafficking problem that is here at home.
Yeah.
Now our dialogue's been around race and culture. How is this situation or this conversation, how is it similar to those other issues that we are currently engaging in as a church, and how is it different?
Wow, that's a really great question. I do want to say this. I want you to know that, you know, I don't presume to speak for everyone. I've got some ideas in terms of what I think, how I think these things are different. But certainly others may have a different perspective than I do, and I'm fine with that. I think for me, one of the ways that I see these things, I see them mostly as the same, in the sense that as a church, when we see the needs of people who are homeless, when we see the needs, when we see people in need, people who we recognize that trafficking is wrong, and these things honestly affect anybody. It doesn't matter what your color is, or your race is, your culture is. Homelessness can affect everyone. And it does. And so, but I think we respond to those needs because we care about people. We recognize that people are hurting. We recognize that is something wrong with people who don't have a home to live in. And we care. We care enough to get involved in different ways, right? We've done many things as a church. We've partnered with organizations before. And we're responsive to those kinds of needs because we see them as people who are in need. I think that this should be the same as that. I think that, you know, when there are people of color who we recognize are, for various reasons, being overlooked or being treated unfairly, our response as people of God can be very much the same, that we just care. And we may not always know what to do individually, but I think we know that to do nothing doesn't feel quite right as well. I think it's the fact that we empathize. We can imagine what it feels like to be homeless. We can imagine what it would feel like to have someone that we love be trafficked, our daughter, our sister. And so I think our hearts respond to that. I think maybe what can feel different, not that it is different, what can feel different is that sometimes it can feel like people's hearts aren't quite as responsive as quickly to these issues that don't, it seems that maybe that because they don't affect directly people who are not Black or brown people, that, you know, sometimes we can be slow to respond. And maybe if there is a difference, that would be what I would say is the difference, or feels like the difference. Again, I don't know that I'm trying to respond to everyone else, but I would say for me, that's what it can feel like. Does that answer that question, you think?
Sure. And I think it's helpful because for me in my life, injustice is just injustice.
Yeah.
And but I recognize that I'm sure Adorned in Grace feels way different to somebody who has experienced a loved one or themselves being trafficked. In the same way, I think for a large part of our church who are Black or people of color, this feels really different.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've thought about it in those terms until we started talking.
Yeah.
Because for me, it was very much in the same realm of the brokenness of this world. And a lot of it, a lot of these instances are far from the Northwest, at least the things that reach a national level of media coverage. And so it can feel far away. And so I think for the discussions, it's helpful for me because it is something that affects us right here and in our church.
Yes. Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Speaking of a large portion of our church, I mean, we are a really diverse church, people from all sorts of backgrounds. What are, I guess, as we look forward to where we're trying to go, what are the signs of a healthy, diverse church?
Again, another great question. I think one of the things that probably is helpful is to consider that when we're talking about diversity, diversity is not the same as integrated. Um, that matters a little bit because certainly I know that we see ourselves, we are certainly an integrated fellowship. There are people, Black people and white people and Asian people, Latino people, and many others that are part of our church family. We are certainly an integrated people, but that isn't necessarily the same as celebrating the diversity of our fellowship. Diversity, I think, allows us to celebrate the inclusiveness of all these different people and cultures and races, not in a homogenous way. That I think one of the things that we had talked about earlier, and I'll kind of go on, maybe I'm going to bridge maybe a later question you were going to ask, but I think it's kind of, there's this idea of being colorblind. Should we try to be colorblind? Is colorblindness the goal? Which would be a fair question. Again, I think it misses the mark, if I'm concerned, to think in terms of colorblindness, because it doesn't allow us to celebrate our differences, right? The differences that we have in eye color. My eyes are brown, yours are blue, gray. What's going on there?
Blue, gray, green.
Blue, gray.
Sure
your hair, at least on your chin, is red.
Yeah.
Mine is gray right now. Those are differences, and we don't have a problem with those differences at all, do we? Yeah. We can celebrate them, but somehow when it comes to race, it can and skin tone. Those things can become issues that separate us, unfortunately. And so, to be colorblind, I don't think is really the goal. I don't want to be. I don't think any of us want us to operate in a homogenous way. I think we want to be able to celebrate difference and differences in culture. I think when I think about differences in culture, I think about music and the different musical genres that are available to us that celebrate differences in culture and ways that people see the world and experience the world, and it's beautiful. And I think that in the same way we can celebrate our differences in color, in race, in culture, in the same ways without having to look at things in a homogenous way. Does that make sense?
It does. I think at first glance, the goal of colorblindness seems idealistic and seems like a good goal. Like, people's worth are the same. People are all valuable, certainly before God. But I think you use the word homogenous, right? To treat everybody as the same, not of the same value, misses a lot. Whether it's, like you said before, the call for sympathy or empathy when hard things are going on, that, this situation has not affected me the same as it has affected you. And if we treated it as it did, then I would probably be getting a lot more care and concern than I needed, and you probably not enough. And maybe vice versa in some other situation. So I appreciate that distinction, because I think, to be colorblind sounds like a good goal, but easily, like you say, misses the mark. So, I sent you my list of questions ahead of time. I wasn't trying to surprise you or ambush you. I wanted you to be able to
appreciate
think
that. We've got notes, right? So I did want to be clear. We do have some notes so that this would be less awkward than it might be if we didn't have notes with us. So I'll make sure to look at my notes as well.
Especially since we're on camera. It's one thing if we're on phone. It's something else if we're,
Right. We typically have these conversations a little more private.
It's true. You're talking about celebrating our diversity. Is there anything specific as the South Sound Church of Christ that we're doing well that's a good example of that, or something specific that you'd like to see us change or do better?
Honestly, I think if we could, I think once we can really begin to have these conversations, I think a lot more will change. I think there's a lot of things that I love about our fellowship. I really do. In fact, I don't think that most people in our fellowship are, looking at things. I don't think most people in our fellowship don't want to be in this diverse fellowship. In fact, I think it's one of the first things that we all sort of see when we come into the doors. It's one of the first things that we begin to really appreciate is that we look around and we see people of different races and cultures and backgrounds that are hanging out with each other and being friends with one another. But I think there's a lot more that we can do and need to do in the way of understanding each other. I think the reality is that I'm realizing, Landon, that because these conversations are so awkward that I think we've avoided them for a long time. And they're not just awkward in the church; they're awkward in the world and in our country. These aren't real conversations that happen a lot. And I know that's true because of the relationships that I have with other ministers and other churches. We're all beginning to realize that none of us have really been talking about these things very much. But certainly a door is open, a door of opportunity is opening for all of us to be able to really engage in understanding each other and to be able to celebrate and appreciate the differences that we come from. And I think that's really helpful and important. I think if we're going to move forward, if we're going to make real progress, I think we cannot continue to avoid these awkward, difficult conversations. Certainly, we've got to do the inner work that I was talking about earlier and prepare ourselves to have these conversations. But we must have the conversations. And that means that we're going to put ourselves in positions where people may disagree or have some differences of opinion. And I think that's okay. I really do. I think you and I at different times have had differences of opinions. And those are okay. What I appreciate about our relationship is that we have both submitted our opinions. We are both willing to submit our opinions and our feelings and our ideas to the Lordship of Jesus. And so I think if we're going to have an impact, not just in our church, but if our church is going to have an impact in our community, then I think all of us are going to at some point have to make that real deliberate leap to submit all of our politics and ideologies and even our feelings, our anger and our rage. At some point, we've got to process it and take it captive and submit it to the Lordship of Jesus. And I believe that as a church, we're uniquely qualified to do that. Yeah.
I think something that, as a mentor to me, you've encouraged me on a number of occasions, to be genuinely curious.
Yeah.
And that's helped me a lot. When I find myself up against a wall and not really sure where to go, where, somebody has communicated a feeling or posted an article or something on Facebook, which of course as a staff, we don't necessarily support that.
Right.
Social media doesn't usually create really healthy dialogue.
Right.
But you've encouraged me to be genuinely curious and figure out why people are feeling the way they do or have the opinion that they do, and that has led me to having some really great conversations with people that I don't normally have conversations with. So I'm grateful for the brothers that have taken time to entertain my questions, tell me how they're feeling or why they see this situation differently than I see it. And as you said, I don't always come out agreeing 100%, but the perspective is usually very clear to me of why people are feeling what they're feeling.
Yeah.
And so I think those kind of questions, rather than leaping to my immediate response, which is I don't agree and here's why, to ask what they're feeling, and that I can share like this is how it looks from my angle, but you obviously see it differently. Can you explain that to me a little bit? And those have gone really well, which I'm grateful for. Like you said, we're uniquely qualified as the church.
Yeah. And I want to say too, real quickly, I think it's important for me as a Black man as well to understand that there may be some differences of thought and idea. I really appreciate the fact that you are curious and that you have allowed yourself to be curious and asking questions. I also know that it can be really challenging with when we display, microaggressions is what I call them, or not what I call them, it's what they're called. Kind of some of the things that, in anger, I think we can sometimes, as the Bible would say, give full vent to our anger. And we do that in a way that honestly does not allow us to keep the spirit of unity through the bond of peace. And I think that's kind of what I've seen as well on Facebook. I think that we have, in an effort, I think many of us, and I guess I shouldn't say us because I'm not really on Facebook like that, but I have seen posts from brothers and sisters who are angry, and I understand it. They're angry and they're fearful and they're hurting, and they're expressing their hurt and their pain on Facebook. And for some, those kinds of it can feel very broad, and some of the statements can feel very open-ended and accusatory of all white people. And I recognize that the reality is that we've got more allies than not, and that it can be just really disruptive to the unity that I'm confident that we all really want anyway. And so I just want to acknowledge that as well, that one of the things that I want to make sure to continue to work on personally is again, I've got work to do as well. I understand that I've got experiences and things that I've been through, and those things have to be processed. I think I shared with you before that whenever I see these events, an event like what happened with George Floyd or Breonna Taylor or Ahmaud Arbery or the many others that have happened over the decades, centuries. But whenever I see those things play out, there are triggers for me. And I have to really make sure that I take the time to acknowledge what I'm feeling and to process those feelings, but not in a way that that becomes accusatory towards you and that blames you for these things. And at the same time, I really want to know that you care about the things that I'm feeling, and that you are willing to sit with me in my pain and even in my anger at times, that you're just willing to sit beside me in that feeling and that anger and be my brother. And that has made, I just want you to know, Lynn, and that's made all the difference in the world for me as we've gone through this time together. And Elias has done that with me too. And I just want to say I just really appreciate you guys as my brothers and my friends in that. And I wish that all of us, all the brothers and sisters of color in particular who are going through something, I wish they would all have that same feeling and experience.
Amen. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that my presence has been encouraging. I don't always know what to say, but just to be together, I'm more than willing to be with you. A little while ago, you brought up microaggressions as one, as a particular hurdle for people on different sides of the table to overcome. I would just say I really appreciate our relationship. You've been very patient and gentle with me, and letting me know where your boundaries are and what things are triggering or what things are sensitive. But I've never gotten offense from you. And I appreciate that, because the discussion around microaggressions can be really challenging for me sometimes, because the articles that I've read, I appreciate the public service announcement version of it. Hey, these things can be really sensitive. Please, mind your mouth. But it's hard. Some of the articles I've read sound very accusatory and seems like they're putting these things in categories that I wouldn't put them in. So some of that is just me. I categorize them differently. I don't experience them the same way as you would experience them. Right. But I feel like you've given me a lot of grace. They're very unintentional on my part. Even, you've spent a fair amount of time even just talking about hair, which, it's a thing. It's a thing. It's a thing. Yep, it is. And, the terms that I've used that you don't prefer, and you've taught, shared with me some history and the reasons why you do you. But I appreciate that, with assuming that I am your brother and am coming from a place of love, and I just need to understand this, and you'll share really gently and considerately with me how you feel. Or, hey, there's been times, not even for you, but just in general, I'd be careful in phrasing it that way. Or, hey, I wouldn't worry about that right now. Just, just be a great listener, and we'll get through it together. I appreciate this, giving me the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
So.
I do think that sometimes, I think what we all want is to be on the other side of this yesterday.
Yeah.
And the reality is that I think, it's going to take us some time to get to the other side of this, but we will get there together. The only way we'll get to the other side of this is if we get there together. And I think that can be one of the challenges as well. I think, the more we are determined to just fix this problem and to wish it away, the harder I think it can be to just listen and to understand and to empathize. And I think listening is really important, but we can't stop with listening. And empathy is really important, but we can't stop with empathy. At some point, we do need to move beyond just the listening and just the empathy. But I think right now that's kind of where we are in this process. And it is a process. And so I think that, my encouragement to all of us as brothers and sisters, my encouragement is for all of us to just continue to care about each other, to continue to care that the things that I care that the things that I say are going to have an effect on how you can hear what I have to say. That matters to me. And because I love you and respect you. And I want you to understand me better. I want to, I'd be lying if I didn't admit that I want to be understood.
Yeah.
But I also would be lying if I said if I didn't say I want to understand. I really do want to understand you better. And I feel like the more we talk like this, the better we're able to understand each other. And so this isn't the last conversation we'll ever have. In fact, this isn't the first conversation we've had. This is just one of many conversations that Landon and I have had. And certainly I'm confident that we'll continue this dialogue. And we want to encourage you, if you're ready, especially with people that you feel close with and that you're connected with, that you have this kind of relationship with. We want to encourage you to begin the dialogue, to begin this process of conversation, real conversations about how you're really feeling and how you're processing your all of these things that are going on in real time. We love you, and definitely are glad that you guys could join us in the backyard for this honest conversation today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.